again, thank you all so much just for allowing me to be here today and be able to share not only just a bit of my story, but also just the experiences and trying to work on how can we shape a strategic and intentional pathway and community for foster youth and foster families overall. Again, my name is Justin Black. I'll share a little bit about myself. Again, as mentioned, I'm an author of the Redefining Normal book, serial entrepreneur, business owner, and most importantly, my more important roles in my life are being a husband and father to these two amazing people right here. Being a husband and father, this is my crew right here, and the thing that keeps me going. And with the work that you all are doing in the child welfare system and the foster care system, I always try to show my family because the work you're doing, the young men and women that you're building up, it contributes to strong, healthy families in the future. And so I always want to emphasize that and keep that on the forefront of our brain and our heart as you go through our conversation and presentation today. So, oh, throughout our presentation, one of the things I would love to touch on and mention is that I would love for our conversations to be very interactive. So feel free to share in the chat some of the responses to the questions, and we'll have scenarios and different case studies to go over. But I would love for you to share your responses in the chat as I'll be asking a series of questions along with sharing information. And just looking forward to hearing from you all as well as we continue to grow and connect and have this conversation. And to start off, while our goals for today include creating a ideal pathway, what are the elements that go into serving and supporting foster youth? What is our role in the community of foster youth, and how can we go about helping being collaborators and partners with them in this process of challenging what we view as normal, acceptable, and trying to understand the background and experiences of those who have experienced the system and how that impacts their future as well. So, with that being said, my first question for you all this afternoon is, what does redefining normal mean to you? Now, that phrase, that title is something you may or may not have heard of before, redefining normal. A lot of us, it can catch us off guard. We may not fully understand what it means, but maybe in the context of child welfare, in the context of foster and adoptive families and foster youth, is your perspective and idea of redefining normal? What does that mean to you? By the way, there are no wrong answers, and I'm looking forward to you all sharing and hearing some of your opinions and thoughts, and just being able to interact. So feel free to share in the chat. What is your definition or perspective of redefining normal? Or go ahead, take a look in the chat, and feel free. I'll give you guys a second to respond and think about this because, again, this may be a new phrase, so you may have need some time to really think and process what this means. So Jessica
Yes.
said reducing the stigma around. Let me see, reducing the stigma around mental health. I love that.
I was also gonna say that when I think of like redefining normal, it almost to me is like, what in your head is like the normal life, like redefining what that actually is. Because do any of us really have like a normal situation?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. What is normal and being able to be challenged with our concept and idea of what is normal. A lot of that means us being uncomfortable, us putting ourselves in a position to be in a situation where we're not always most comfortable, but a lot of times that's where we're growing. So I appreciate that perspective and just that approach as well. Any other thoughts and perspectives on what it means to redefine normal? Okay, and I see a message from Anna. So Anna said, learning that healthy relationships, emotional safety, and consistency should be normal. I love that. So setting a standard for what is normal and being able to do that. In our conversations with young people and foster youth, we a lot of times help them identify their principles and what they want the foundation of their life to be. So I appreciate so much of that. Healthy relationships, emotional safety, consistency should be the normal. And Jacob also mentioned that shifting perspective or away from the status quo. Amazing, amazing. No, I love that. And also normalizing that normal, quote unquote, may be different for everyone, and that's okay. Everyone's normal can be different. I love that. That is amazing. And yeah, we're going to get into a little bit of that also. Jessica also mentioned that recognizing everyone's morals and values. That's huge. That is amazing. Thank you all for sharing that. And I think that that so much embodies much of the idea and concept behind redefining normal as well. And so during our process of creating redefining normal, it was such a instinctive idea and a hard hitting idea for many people who have experienced child welfare, experienced trauma, and so many other elements of the barriers that come with shaping much of our identity. And during our development and of this concept, redefining normal, here's kind of the approach and definition that we had when it came to the work we do, our book, and the message that we try to spread. So when it came to redefining normal, our perspective is each and every one of us has a normal. All of us on this call has an idea, perspective of what is normal. And your normal is the identity that has been shaped by your family, community, and society. So all of us have a perspective and idea of what is normal based on the aspects of family, community, and society around us. As former foster youth, we inherited a culture of ideas, and culture of ideas that was a reflection of the trauma of our family and community around us. And with that in mind, this became our reality and the image that we have of ourselves. So when trauma oftentimes is normalized within the family and community and it becomes cultural, many young people are growing up in that and they grow up in somewhat of a bubble where they're not able to see their life outside of the trauma, abuse, and things that they've gone through within their family and community. And naturally, that becomes a part of their identity. And when they see themselves in the mirror, they can't detach their past experiences, their abuses, or maybe even their abuser from their identity. And much of that is played out and impacts our future. And during this conversation, I want us to understand what is our role in reshaping, redefining, and redirecting young people in foster families and foster youth when it comes to their future and their normal. Many of us may have a perspective of normal that may not be the healthiest or may not be the most conducive for our future, especially when thinking about those who have children or will have children. How can we make a positive and healthy impact on the next generation? So, taking a look at this definition, and we'd love to hear some of your thoughts. What are some of your thoughts and perspectives just hearing some of the definition of redefining normal? Is this a concept that you're generally familiar with and may have experienced in the past, or is this something that maybe have caught you off guard where you can kind of say, oh, I haven't thought about redefining normal or even trauma in this sense or lens before. And I've encountered this many times, but I haven't heard it put in this way. Or maybe this kind of speaks exactly to much of your experiences and interactions with foster youth and families. We'd love to hear some of your thoughts on this. I'll take a look at the chat. Perfect, perfect. Yeah. So continue to just take in this idea of redefining normal. Just let it resonate with just how we've processed much of what we have experienced and encountered. I'm sure just in your work, many of you may have experienced and seen how trauma can be normalized within families and communities and acted out in our lives. And going through that process, I think is huge and realizing that and just during this conversation, seeing how we can strategically approach those individuals, communities, and families to be active partners in building up a healthier future. So, in many of my conversations, I always try to generally start with just vulnerability. And vulnerability, I feel, opens up the conversation and opens us up to build an authentic relationship. While you not may not know me much, I believe that it's important for me to share a little bit of my story to be able to allow you to share your experiences, to open your heart and your mind to be able to learn and grow, and to be able to take in the information, knowing that it's coming from an authentic place. So, as it relates to my family history and experience, I come from two generations of domestic violence on my dad's side of the family, and generations of addiction on my mom's side of the family. And with me being the youngest of five siblings, it's kind of consumed my life and shaped much of my reality growing up and much of my experiences. So as you can imagine, the youngest of five kids growing, battling generational things that were set before me decades before I was born and thought of. How could I overcome these things, and what would this really mean for my identity and my view of the world and who I will become? So, what this told me about my identity in school and seeing the domestic violence in my household, naturally, I thought that violence was the way to solve much of my problems. And even in a strange way in school, having using violence and intimidation to, in some strange way, make friends, and that was my idea of receiving love. Through intimidation, through violence, and in elementary school, that was my way of communicating. And so going through that process, it started to, of course, that didn't work for long, and getting kicked out of school, suspended from school, it wasn't sustainable. And I had to face that reality, especially when entering into the foster care system at 9 years old. I had to encounter that reality that, this way of carrying myself and my identity wasn't sustainable. And so how do I survive this journey now of being away from my parents and going into the foster care system as the youngest of five kids and entering into the foster care system. And naturally, many young people who enter into the foster care system, as you may have seen, may feel as if their parents have given up on them and they're not worthy of love. And this sense of worthlessness and this idea of being unlovable is carried out throughout my identity in foster care and was taken out on my friends, on my family, and those around me, and the houses that I lived in. And so this conflict was something that, on the surface level, many foster parents may have seen as just bad behavior and the issue. But digging underneath the tip of the iceberg, what the truth and reality was is that unresolved trauma, unhealed relationships, and brokenness that was unaddressed and unresolved. And so, going into the concept of normal and redefining normal, how trauma became our normal. So, the process of leaving our normal and entering into a new one. So, entering into the foster care system, I was fortunate to, for a couple years, live with my aunt, my dad's sister. And for a few years, she did an amazing job with giving a structure, rules, and a standard. Unfortunately, with me coming from a chaotic household and environment, that was this environment of structure, rules, and somewhat stability was actually my chaos. And the normal that I've grown accustomed to with my biological parents and family, of the recklessness, of just craziness, of the drama in my life, that became my comfort zone. And so what do we do when the normal that we see is healthy and safe, maybe chaotic for someone who's gone through the foster care system and has a history of normalized trauma? Those are some of the concepts and the conflicts that I had. Just the what the outside world saw as chaotic being from my biological family was actually the normal for me and acceptable and comfort zone. But the stability, the structure, and the safety that I entered into in a different home became my chaos because of the rules, because of the structure, and because of the things that were going on. And with that concept, I would love for you to all to speak to any type of familiarity you have with that. What issues or things have you all run into where you've seen someone transition from maybe brokenness, maybe chaos from your perspective, and things that have been uncomfortable, and they enter into maybe a home or environment with stability, with safety and structure, and that seems to be uh, not the best fit for them or maybe chaotic from their perspective. We'd love for you all to share a little bit of, give me a yes or no in the chat if you've seen or experienced that maybe in your work. Yeah, definitely. Those who have transitioned from chaos and going into a new environment, facing issues, I'm sure many of us and all of us have uh, seen much of that in our experiences. So definitely appreciate that. And so, with that in mind, the question I have for you all before we get into our case study and activity, the question I have for you all is, what work have you done to learn how youth and families want to be loved? And we're going to take our time on this question because I would really love to get your perspective and approach. What have you done to learn how youth and families want to be loved? We'll love to hear some tactics, some strategies, and I have a case study coming up on the next few slides. But before we get there, we'd love to just get a little bit of your perspective on this question. So, what have you done to learn how youth and families want to be loved? And this question could be a tricky one because a lot of us may have unaware, but maybe a little bit unaware of our biases and how we approach relationships that we build with those in the foster care system. Many of us, and even if you haven't done much work on trying to understand youth and families and how they want to be loved, maybe this is an opportunity and a question that can prompt that for some self reflection. So one person said, I taught middle schoolers for about 10 years, and I think the biggest thing that I did was listen to them. Sounds maybe cliche, but it really helped me understand what each family and student needed and wanted from me and their teach as their teacher. That's huge. That's huge. And I think that even listening, while like you said, it may sound cliche, not only is it huge, I think that there is a large umbrella of techniques when it comes to the approach when it comes to listening. One of the things I learned, even as a resident assistant in college, which is funny, one of the things I learned is just physical communication around just our body language. So communicating in a way where we're on the same level as young people and families. We have a sense of questions and we're not directing the conversation, but we're kind of a passenger during the conversation. I think these are key things that could be huge when it comes to listening and just allowing those that we're serving to direct the conversation as they are the leader in that relationship or in that partnership. So I appreciate that. Anna mentioned active listening and building trust. That's huge. And even to challenge you a little bit further, and I would love for you to share in the comments, what did that look like for you? Active listening and building trust. So sharing just a little bit of actionable things, like what were the exact things that you did to work on building trust? What did active listening look like for you? Was it a certain setting or a certain environment? Maybe isolating someone one on one, maybe approaching certain questions or certain things in a way differently than you usually would. What did that look like for you? Another person mentioned, I would say getting to know the youth over time, noticing things about them, then paying attention and following through. Follow through seems to be one of the biggest things I hear over and over. Over and over causes frustration and distrust. Yeah, I think that that's huge. Thank you for sharing that. And that's the consistency piece that a lot of young people and youth are looking for. I think for many people who have entered the foster care system, including myself, when you have a situation where people who are closest to you may have seemingly, not true, but they have seemingly given up on you and release you into the foster care system, that sense of trust can be one that's hard to build. And naturally, a lot of young people, when someone's nice to them, they're looking for the honeymoon phase to be over with and looking to try to get to a point where it's like, okay, now just It's let's get to you leaving me or breaking my heart or whatever the situation may be. But I think acknowledgement is huge, and follow through, as you mentioned, is huge as well. So give me a yes or no in the chat. How many of you all have heard of the love languages, the five love languages? It's something usually done with a lot of romantic partners, but uh, everyone's heard of the love language exam. So also give me another yes or no in the chat. Have you taken the love languages exam? And if so, maybe even put what was your top what was your top form of wanting to be loved if you haven't, or if you've taken it? So everyone's heard of it. A few people may not have taken it. The five love languages, I believe, are uh, gift giving, quality time, um, gift giving, quality time. Help me out. um, is it gift giving, quality time, touch? There's a three. Words of affirmation. Yep, that's my top one. Words of affirmation and quality time for me. And acts of service. Yes, there we go. Thank you for helping. So those are the five love languages. And so the reason why I asked that is because when it comes to how we want to be loved, I think we have a perspective of how we want to be loved. So let's say that we're serving someone who is huge on quality time and maybe huge on gift giving, but you may feel that your love language is words of affirmation. Maybe your love language is touch. You give high fives and hugs and pounds and everything else. And that's the way you want to be loved. But how can we be intentional on shifting and intentional about how those that we're serving, how do they want to be loved? We're going to get into that in our next few slides. Shifting our mindset from how do we want to be loved onto how does the youth and families that we're serving, how do they want to be loved? So I have a first case study for you in a scenario I'd like to go over. So redefining family. So Brian is a 16-year-old who has lived in five different foster homes since age 9. His biological family struggle with addiction, and he often says, family doesn't mean anything to me. In his current placement, his foster parents try to include him in family dinners and weekend activities, but Brian stays in his room. When asked what he wants for his future, he shrugs and says, just to get out." And so this is a tough one. This is a tough situation. When thinking about that scenario, and let me know if I'm going a little too fast or you'd like me to go back. But when thinking about that scenario, how have Brian's past experiences shaped his current definition of how family and normal? So, given that scenario, I mentioned someone in five different homes, entering the system at 9 years old, and really not sure about their future. When the foster family they're currently with wants to include them in things, but they have a past with their family history of addiction, and they just not really feeling a part of the family, feeling distant, and just want to just get away from everything around them. How have Brian's past experiences shaped his current definition of family and normal? So, we'd love to hear your thoughts on that. I know it may be a lot to type, so I'll take my time and let you all have an opportunity to respond to that. 'How have Brian's past experiences shaped his current definition of family and normal?' I'll go ahead, go back to the last slide so you can just revisit some of the information about Brian. 16-year-old, lived in five different foster homes since the age of 9. Biological family struggle with addiction, and he often says family doesn't mean much to me anymore. Doesn't want to be involved with activities or dinners or anything with his foster family. He kind of just stays to himself. and not really sure about his future. So, how has Brian's past experiences shaped his current definition of family and normal? So, thank you, Jacob. Jacob said he might not have faith in the idea of family or that he can only count on and depend on himself. Yeah, and many of you may have noticed for a lot of current and former foster youth developed a sense of unhealthy independence. Now, of course, many of us would like for young people and teenagers to be independent, but I do think there is a healthy sense of reliance on adults and parental figures and mentors and families that we need. And because of that distrust of instability within going to multiple different homes, that sense of dependency can be removed and not available for a lot of young people and youth. So yeah, I mean this. I mean it's normal. Oh, yeah, scroll back up. His normal seems to be defined by not really having a consistent and safe family situation. So he feels like it doesn't even matter. Someone also mentioned he may have a hard time with wanting to build a relationship with his placement because he's been moving so many times. Oh, let me go back. He's been moving so many times. It may feel normal to keep to himself. He may feel like he has nobody to trust other than himself. Definitely. Another person mentioned probably easier to say it doesn't matter than it is to face the feelings that come with that. Oh, I love that. So that's the tip of the iceberg aspect of it. The tip of the iceberg that a lot of times we see and hear words where there's so much to dig into. And the words may be the tip of the iceberg that requires us to dig deeper into, um, maybe an opportunity to dig deeper. And that mentioning of, hey, I don't even care anymore. I'm giving up is something that a phrase said to avoid true feelings and feeling burnt out emotionally. Someone also said, I would say his definition of family looks very fractured, as if no one cares about him, having struggled being away from his family and then moving to 5 different homes. He may have felt discarded. His sense of normal and lack of ability to think of a future really may stem from lacking stability and love in foster care. He may not want to think of the future as he may not know if he'll move to more homes or more cities. Yeah. And so the even the idea of the future is just scary. And, so much of our future for current and former foster youth out of our hands. So that concept overall can be very difficult. Thank you all for your responses too. I want to jump to the next question, next aspect of this. So, the follow up question I would have as we reflect on this is, what actions can a caregiver or a social worker take to help him begin reclaiming that narrative? So he has a sense of his past is fractured. So we can think of his past and his sense of identity is fractured. His future seems uh can't even imagine what the future will be like, and he just has no confidence in where he'll be, where he'll land, and the things he'll do. So, given you in your position, your current role, what would be some things that you could do? I said caregiver or social worker, but given your specific role, what would be some things that you could do to help him begin to reclaim his narrative? So, think about your role, what's in your capability of things to do, ways to support young people and foster youth. What would be some things you can do to help him reclaim his narrative? And I think it may be pretty difficult because sometimes it's hard to engage when someone is young people are not really willing to engage or burnt out and experiencing a sense of hopelessness. And so being able to contribute and engage may be just difficult overall. But I want to start with hearing some of your thoughts on just how would you approach this situation given your experience, given your current position, and things you feel you're capable of doing. Even feel free to share if you ran into a similar situation in the past. Feel free to share something that you've done before. So maybe I'm sure many of you have ran into maybe a similar situation. Feel free to share something that you've done before in the past that that may have worked and may have gained traction with building a relationship, with helping someone reclaim their narrative. Before I share some of my thoughts on this, I would love to just hear from you. Actions that can be taken. So as you all finish up sharing or typing in the chat for this question, some things that I would say is with the concept and theme of redefining normal. I think it's where this person, where Brian has kind of landed at this point, is very unfamiliar territory, very inconsistent. And so I think just going back to the basics of what can Brian have in his control that will give him basic stability, a basic sense of control. I remember when I first entered the foster care system, I lived with my brother, actually my oldest brother, for 2 years, and then I transitioned to live with my aunt, and then moved around two or three more times from there. But one of the things that was huge and very consistent and helpful for me in my life is when I began to play sports. Around the time I entered foster care at 9, I think around 10 or 11, I started to play on the football team. And no matter where I landed or what house or home I lived in, football was like the only consistent thing that I've really had in much of my childhood. And so from that point of playing football from 10 years old or 9 or 10 years old to pretty much 18 or 19, for like almost 8 or 9 years of my life, that was something consistent that I can have control over. And I think that helping someone rebuild their narrative, as someone mentioned earlier, when social workers would come to my football games or mentors of mine would come to my football games to really care about the things that I care about. I think that was huge. And I see someone even mentioning it already. Is just showing interest in the things that they care about and enjoy themselves would be a huge outlet. So let me go ahead and jump to the chat and read a few responses. So one person said, provide opportunities for social connection and outlet with their expression, interest, passion, hobbies, offering age appropriate choices for them to make decisions within their life. I think that's huge. That's huge, and goes right up the alley what I mentioned as well. And so think of a good way to potentially build a relationship without getting into the nitty gritty. Start by taking interest in their interest. Maybe taking them out for dinner or ice cream. Everybody opens up with food, right? So dinner or ice cream or their favorite place. Not making them feel that they have to talk about foster care or their life on a deep level. Slowly build relationship that then allows you to have a good relationship that can lead to those deep conversations where redefining can begin to happen. He may be open to ideas at that point if he feels he can trust you. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that. And I think that that is amazing. Being able to normalize life and experiences of just this is not just a foster youth that you're talking to, but this is a person who likes to maybe draw, likes to act. They're into engineering. There's so many different elements of interest that they have, and being able to tap in and be interested in those things kind of humanizes the person to make them a part of real life experiences. So I appreciate just that perspective of that helps them redefine their perspective of life and so many other things. And if every single person in their life just approaches them as this is your job and you're approaching them as a foster youth or another case number, then it'll be hard to build trusting, authentic relationships and just remind them that they are in another home, in another situation. But allowing them to build authentic and true relationships will be huge. Another person said, I would try to talk with him, find out what his interests are, and maybe find something he can do to enjoy himself. Also, one of the things that I would love to add is how can we make ourselves uncomfortable? I think there are a lot of times that we generally ask the young person or youth to kind of make the 180 and make the change. I remember going into a household with my foster dad, and the standard in the household where I was in with my foster dad is that you're sleeping in my bed, you're eating my food, you're in my house, and I had no ownership over anything. And that sense of ownership being stripped from me made me feel as if, I have nothing and there's no need for me to be in this environment. But I think the sense of empowerment when it comes to ownership and owning small responsibilities and owning different things in their environment will be huge. And so, how can we uh, help foster youth and young people have a sense of ownership and control in the things around them in an environment in a life that seems so chaotic and unstable and unpredictable, and out of their control and out of their hands? What are the small things that we can give them and support them with that can build a sense of control, stability, and ownership? Jessica also mentioned lots of self care and coping strategies he can use when times get tough, helping him understand what's in his control and what isn't. I love that. I love that. And last but not least, the last question I have on this, really quick, that I would love to go over is how can small, consistent moments of belonging start to rebuild trust and connection? How can small, consistent moments of belonging start to rebuild trust and connection? I would love for you to even share like what those things can actually look like. And I mentioned the love languages a while ago. So maybe even thinking about that as an outlet. So let's say someone's love language may be quality time, maybe them getting outside of their room and outside of their house, maybe going for a walk. I've heard from so many mentors that going for a walk and talking, your blood gets to flowing, your thoughts get to working better, and that's such a helpful aspect of just mental health in general. Just moving around and moving our body, getting our blood flowing. Maybe going to a coffee shop and sitting down, and maybe that's your bi-weekly, however often you can connect with a young person. Just buying them a blueberry muffin at a coffee shop. That's just your thing, and things you can do to slowly rebuild trust in that connection. Maybe you could share even things. I would love to hear examples of things that you all have done in the past. What are some things you all have done in the past? Yep. Jessica mentioned it could bring youth hope. Okay, small, consistent moments of belonging starts to rebuild trust and connection. So as we go through the process of just answering the questions. I have a few more questions for you, so I want to make sure that we have time for that. So we're going to move on from this last one. I have a few more questions that I want to ask that will definitely hit home. And Jacob said, create a sense of safety, stability, expectation, and something to look forward to. That is huge. And so, on that note, one of my favorite activities I want us to think about, and I want you to carry this in your conversations when it comes to building authentic, healthy pathways and relationships for foster youth. Many of us have a house of origin, right? And while this, we may think of a physical house, I'm thinking culturally. So while young people may have grown up in multiple different homes or environments and situations, many of us culturally have an environment that we've grown accustomed to. An example would be for me as the youngest of five kids. Uh, we oftentimes lived in a homeless shelter or a one or two bedroom apartment, and with all my siblings and both my parents. It was a crowded household, a lot of a mess, just drama, and even our household was known as the household with all the drama, where my mom and dad will literally be physically fighting outside, and the neighbors watching us outside, and it's kind of the cultural thing that was built within my house of origin. So physically cramped in, culturally violent, loud, just at each other's throat, and just always upset. This is kind of the environment and the foundation of my house of origin. And so identifying those characteristics were huge. But then the second part of this activity is house by design. What would be the house by design that we build? Not only just physically, when I ask foster youth this, they always say I want to live in a nice big house or mansion. And I'm like, that's perfectly fine. But uh, one of the things I want to emphasize is what would their house by design look like culturally? And even sometimes in some sense physically, to where, I remember my wife's adoptive parents, they have a long table in their dining room because they want to invite all the neighbors' kids over for dinner. They don't have a TV in the living room because they want to build conversation and connection. So the physical things contribute to the cultural environment of the house overall. But with me and my wife now, the things that we emphasize is communication and connection, being able to talk. And we have like 30 minutes at night, every night, where we just kind of talk and go over our day. Every Sunday, we talk about our week, what to expect, how last week was, and just really try to check in. And those type of mental health check-ins were not as valued or even possible in my house of origin. But what are going to be the things of the house of origin aspects that we want to encourage and influence? And so I want you to take this activity with your foster youth and families that you are supporting and loving right now, and see how you can support and contribute to their lives in a meaningful and impactful way as they kind of imagine what did their house by design look like. Because I think it's so important for us to think about this when it comes to examples like Brian, right? Who may not even know what his future looks like, doesn't care, or just avoiding those feelings and thoughts of what a future will look like. I think dreaming and thinking about our house by design, it ultimately helps foster youth not only just reshape their current identity, but it helps them be intentional and having a vision for the future as well for the next generation. I think that aspect is huge and very impactful. So think about this, and I would love for you to carry this activity to your house, to your relationships with your current and former foster youth. And last but not least, one of the things I would like to go over is the 7 life domains. Give me a yes or no in the chat. How many of you all have heard of the 7 life domains? Yes or no in the chat. How many of you all have heard of the 7 life domains? I see one yes, two yeses. The 7 life domains. Many of you have heard of it. Perfect, perfect. Now, based since pretty much all of you have heard of the 7 life domains, given I have them listed here, what would you say if I had them numbered? It kind of similar to the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Yes, and this is from the NKC Foundation. Given that is, let's say these were numbered, right? These are 7 life domains, 1 through 7. Give me the numbers of the roles you feel like you fulfill in the lives of youth and families. So maybe you're in an education academic role, you support them in their social relationships and connection. Give me the number. So one will be represented as education academics, two, finances and employment, so on and so forth. And 7 will be life skills. So feel free to comment in the comments or in the chat the numbers in which you feel like in your current role that you support youth and families in. And for those who may not be as familiar, these are the 7 life domains that make up the needs and supports for young people and family, or young people mainly, the foster youth. And so these are the areas of support where that's mainly needed in order for them to be successful. They need to be supported in all seven of these areas for them to have stability and be successful. Again, originally created by the Amy Casey Foundation. So, what areas does your youth hold the most triggers? What changes in our communication and conversation will be better? First, I would just like us to identify our role. What would be our role in the lives of youth and families? So, once we've then identified maybe our role in the youth and families, some of us it may be difficult to think because we cover all seven. But how can we build a community of individuals to support them in multiple different areas? So one way to we can support with relationship building and consistency is making sure that young people are supported in all seven of these areas, not just by one person, not just by one organization, but how can we find a support system of people to support them in these seven areas and be super intentional about that. So where they have consistency, they have reliability, and those that can willing to cheer them on and be help them be successful in their life. And something else to consider: the areas of where young people hold the most triggers and trauma. Naturally, for a lot of young people, is the housing aspect that holds a lot of triggers and trauma, and being intentional about that because that's like the as mentioned Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That's the basic safety needs, but what changes in our communication and conversation can better support them? So, given that we took a look at the seven life domains, understanding how youth and young people need to be helped and supported, how can that change our conversations and the way we contribute and support youth and families? Understanding our role and then our conversation. So, think about that for a second. That's a question I want you to carry with you beyond our conversation today. But as we wrap, I want you to think about this. One of the key things in this conversation when reshaping the pathways and building an intentional community and relationship with young people and foster youth, having a mutually agreed upon vision and standard for your relationship will help redefine normal. What this looks like is being in partnership with young people and allowing them to say, what does it look like for you to be loved? What does it look like for you to be cared for? What does it look like for me to support you? And allowing them to shape that definition and that standard of love, of support, of care. And so allowing them to shape that definition of love, support, and care, I think is huge. And it contributes to so many other things and areas in our life. And so, closing remarks, as I started the conversation with, vulnerability is necessary for relationship building. Mistakes are a part of the process. So reevaluating is our approach. Maybe we haven't thought much about how youth and young people want to be loved, how they want to be supported, how we can help shape their future overall. Maybe we haven't thought too much about that. But being intentional about that is huge. And that mistake, while it may have damaged or impacted some of our relationships in the past, recognizing that and learning from that and always being willing to learn is huge and necessary. So as we wrap our conversation today, I leave it to you to continue to redefine normal, to continue to be intentional about reshaping and creating a pathway for young people and families, and continue to do the work that you're doing. And I'm always just grateful and thankful for your work that you're doing for contributing to my life and those around me to be successful. And I just can't wait to see the impact that you have in the lives of so many youth and families.